I will start this presentation. And again, thank you everyone for showing up today to watch the webinar live. Thank you everyone who's going to watch the webinar afterwards, and I hope you enjoy it. So just a quick overview, what is the reunification team? What does this team do? And this will actually be the bulk of the presentation, this thing. We'll talk about kind of the primary goals and the overview of kind of their meta goals. We'll also try to get through the nitty-gritty of step-by-step what happens. We'll talk about who is a good fit for the reunification team, and we'll also talk about how many people need to be on the reunification team, those kind of things, essential equipment, who do they communicate with, and then we'll go into top 3 challenges of the reunification team. So what is the reunification team, and what is reunification? After any event that takes place that forces the closure of a school, this is the team that reunites parents with their children in a safe and orderly fashion. And again, for the last time, I'll say this, it's not always parents and children, it's responsible, authorized adult and student. But from now on, I'll probably just say parents and children. We teach from an all hazards approach. So I'm trying to be as kind of vague about what kind of event this might be. This might be something where the building is no longer usable following an earthquake or tornado. This might be something dramatic happened at school, and instead of normal dismissal policies, you want to just take the extra step and make sure that parents are receiving their children directly. Most of the time, this is after the school is closing and the kids need to leave the campus. But again, let's say something happens and you just want that extra step. That's what this team does. It reunites the parents, and it does it in an orderly and safe fashion. Another way of thinking about this is it keeps track of all the students, and it makes sure that they are delivered to the correct adult. And to kind of illustrate this point, I'm going to give you a scary scenario, and these are made up names. This is just an idea of what could happen. This is, I'd say, kind of a medium worst case scenario kind of thing. There's obviously far worse cases, but we'll just go through this. So following a fire that left the school building damaged, no one's injured though, Derek rushes to the school to pick up his son. When he gets to the school, he sees all of the children loosely assembled on the basketball courts. Derek finds his son easily, trying to be helpful. He also takes his neighbor Joanne's daughter. When Joanne arrives, she is unable to find her daughter in the chaos that is the basketball courts. Staff are unsure if Joanne's daughter is still on the courts. Joanne is understandably upset. It takes several hours in a police search to figure out what happened. So think about that scenario. Think about kind of things that happened wrong, things that could be fixed. First, the children or the students, I should say, were kind of just in some semi-ordered chaos. They were all in one location, but they were all here, there, everywhere. A parent was able to just come in, take the child, and leave. That parent was also able to take another student and leave. And that created a few problems, because what would happen if Derek's wife showed up and wasn't able to find her son? And no one is sure what happened to her son. And then with the case of Joanne, no one is sure what happened to Joanne's daughter. Maybe someone saw Joanne's daughter leaving with a man that they weren't sure who it was. All these things. And then, in any event that we talk about, any kind of disaster emergency, there's so much anxiety and panic. So the reunification team is very important, and very often they're on the front line dealing with parents, dealing with real high anxiety situations. And anytime that we're in a high anxiety situation, we try to just calm it down, create order, and make sure that things are happening the way they should. So again, the reunification team seeks to orderly reunite parents and children. They keep track of where students are. And throughout the life cycle of any emergency, accountability of personnel is always one of the biggest challenges. And knowing where everyone is when, knowing if they're still in the hot zone, warm zone, cold zone, or if they've left completely. And you really want to know where all of your people, especially your students, are throughout the day, throughout the life cycle of an emergency, so that you know what's going on. And the worst case scenario is something else happens during this reunification process. Either a student gets hurt, they get lost in the shuffling of people. So reunification really is an important part of keeping everyone safe. And we're just going to jump into how reunification works. And there's going to be 5 different areas, and this will change a bit depending on your school and what space you have, but these are kind of the overarching guidance that we are giving. So the first is check-in area, student holding area, parent waiting area, release area, and respite area. And we'll get into all of these in a second, but just kind of a overview of the process, and again, we'll get into this. Parent comes to where they're directed to, and they go to the check-in area. There they, so the staff, they sign in, they say, okay, this is me, here is my ID, here's the student or students who I'm picking up. The runner goes to the student holding area to find the student and says, okay, this is student A, their parent is there. I'm going to bring the student to the release area, bring the parent to the release area, sign out both the parent and the student, and then have them leave. This is going to be a serious webinar today. There are some hard truths that we do need to face. What if the student is not in the student holding area? And that can be for a variety of benign reasons. It could be for a variety of serious reasons. If the student is not in the student holding area for whatever reason, the runner is going to get a group lead if they are not sufficiently trained to be doing this, especially. The runner is going to get a group lead, move the parent to the parent waiting area to either notify the parent of what the student's condition is, if it is known, or to have the parent wait as the staff and faculty try to find out what happened to the student. We're going to break down the different areas for now. Check-in area. This is the first area where the parents are going to arrive and sign in. This is where people need to be directed. You don't need to worry about notifying parents where any of the other areas are. Parents need to know, go to the check-in area. Similar to when we sign in the morning for attendance, we want everyone funneled into one area. This is the area people are funneled into. This is where, again, their IDs are going to be checked, because during reunification, you should always be checking IDs, even if you're positive you know who they are. Be consistent, check IDs. We'll talk a bit about sign-out slips. You can start that slip process going out here. One of the major things about the check-in area, it needs to be out of sight from the students. You do not want the parents being able to see students and jump the barricade trying to get to their students. Obviously, their heart is in the right place. Obviously, we want nothing more than to hand them their healthy student and get them out of there. But we have this process for a reason, and overall, it's going to help everyone. There's also the student holding area. This is after kind of everything that has happened earlier in the day, whatever that might be. The students have been evacuated, or they are in a certain part of the school. The students are going to be in this one area where a runner can come and get a student. Again, this needs to be a safe place, and it needs to be out of sight from parents. For safety, think about whatever scenario is worrying you that might have happened to cause this event in the first place. Make sure that it doesn't come back to put the students in harm again. So let's talk about the swarm of angry bees. If that is what has happened today, we want to make sure that these students are not in an area where a swarm of angry bees might come back. If the building is damaged, we don't want the students hanging out in a building that may or may not be safe. So keep that in mind when figuring out where these areas are. Remember to keep this area staffed with the appropriate amount of staff for the number of students. Again, this is going to really depend on the scenario, and it's also going to depend on your resources. So if you have all of your teachers safe, available to work, then you can very easily staff the appropriate number of students. What you don't want are 2 staff members with hundreds of students. You deal with students all the time. You know that that's just a recipe for anxiety and stress. My high school always had this idea that teenagers with nothing better to do get in trouble. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Again, your needs will kind of dictate your ability in this area. Be prepared for additional medical and psychological problems, emergencies. This is kind of very broad. And we'll again go back to what caused the reunification process to be needed in the first place. If there was, let's say, some kind of weather emergency, and maybe some kids had minor scrapes and bumps at one point, so they were triaged as under green level, and they're fine, and we think that they're fine, but after sitting around for an hour, we find out, actually his ankle should be checked at, looked over. Be prepared for that. Be prepared for the anxiety of any kind of an emergency to get to people in this time. Just keep an eye out for it. Make sure that you have trained professionals and mindful adults monitoring the situation. And we'll get to the respite area in a second. The release area, this is the final check before releasing the student. This is where you're double checking, triple checking, making sure that everything is correct. This is the correct adult for the correct student, and making sure that everything has been signed. The parent is going to sign, the teacher is going to sign, all the information is filled out correctly. After the student has left the release area, they are no longer your immediate problem. They have been released to the care of their parent. On the other hand, once they leave this area, they're out of your hands. If there's any doubt about whether they should go, any doubt whether this was the correct procedure, once they're past this area, they're gone. Parent waiting area. This is again the area where if a student is not located immediately, is not in the student holding area, then parents are going to be led here. And I should say something about the student holding area, again, about keeping that area at least sort of organized as best you can. And the part of the need is once a parent comes to pick up a student, that student should be able to be located and moved out. You want that to happen relatively quickly. Obviously, with a lot of students in one area over a period of time, they're not going to sit in line the entire time, but you want to be able to move the students to the release area as quickly as reasonably possible. But again, the parent waiting area, if the student is not found in the holding area, group leader moves parent here. And you say group leader just because, it allows for a runner to be a bit less experienced and rely on the expertise, experience of maybe a more mature, maybe a more experienced staff or faculty member. And just kind of group leader so that there is someone with that kind of experience who can sit with the parent and give information in a compassionate manner. Any information about the student's whereabouts and the condition should be given here. They should not be given in the general check-in area. You want to keep that area as business-like. You don't want to cause additional stress to a group if you can, if it is easier to bring the parent or individuals into a separate area so as not to cause additional stress to the group. So if there's any information about the student's whereabouts and condition, this is the time to give it. Maybe you know that the student was taken to the hospital, but maybe there is no information available. You don't know where the student is right now, but you're going to keep them up to date. This is kind of you circle back and you talk to the attendance team and you say, okay, this student was actually on a field trip today. Or you say, okay, well, this student made it outside of the building because they were checked in for attendance at this point. So we have that. Now we just need to figure out what happened to your student. So there's that. Check and give updates regularly. This is something I will echo all the time. This is something we echo in business continuity and communications and all the time. Give updates regularly, even if you have nothing to update. You could give an update when you get information, or you can say every 5-10 minutes, circle back and say, hey, no new information, but we're still working on it. And the latter option is going to reduce panic and stress a lot. But again, expect high anxiety. Put yourself in their shoes. It's going to be a very high anxiety area and situation. If you have counselors or mental health professionals, anyone trained in psychological first aid, try to have them circle to this area. Try to keep this area private if possible. And again, you want to reduce the spread of anxiety. And you also want to be compassionate and give worried individuals a bit of privacy. And again, if possible, and this really will depend on the constraints of your physical area and your what kind of emergency happened today. And then this is the respite area. This is the very high acuity kind of staffed by real mental health professionals, medical professionals. This should be an area for students, maybe staff and faculty, but not parents. You don't want parents talking with students. You don't want that kind of spread of information. You want to keep the anxiety on the rumors as low as possible. This is, imagine that you are filling your gymnasium with the students for the student holding area, and there's some kids who need some extra help, need just some quiet alone time, need someone to talk to. Move those students to an area. You do not want a few students who are understandably upset to cause kind of a mass panic amongst your students. So you want to move them to this area, and you want to try and give them whatever immediate aid you can. One of the things I want to stress, this is not a disciplinary zone. This is not a place to send the kid who's acting out just to have them sit in the corner. That's not what this area is for. Obviously, if they're acting out because of anxiety, then obviously they need help. Don't ignore them, but don't send people here just to get them quiet. Again, stepping back, this is kind of the overall process for reunification. So parents are going to go to the check-in area. And I should mention the reunification process might happen at your school. It might happen at your primary or secondary evacuation site. It might be that all the students are going to be loaded up into buses and driven to a school down the road. So it might be your facilities where this happens. It might not be your facilities that happen. Where you do this process, what happened that day is really going to affect and kind of lead where these zones are and how they are set up. That said, whenever possible, you should practice and you should plan for, okay, our school building is uninhabitable. How do we where do we move the students? How do we move the students? And how do we set up these 5 zones? Just some general things circling back. So anyways, parents sign in the check-in area. They need to show ID, and you need to check that against the emergency pickup card that you have on your files, either specifically for the purposes of reunification or more generally for dismissal. Students have people who are allowed to pick them up. Once the ID has been verified, your runner will go to the student holding area and find the student and bring the student to the release area. And again, you're not bringing the parent to the student holding area because parents and students don't mix. Assuming that the student is found and is in good condition, the student and the parent are reunited in the release area. Once again, all the information, all the forms are checked, everything is signed out, and then the parent will take the student home away. Again, if the student is not immediately found, the runner, either themselves or with the help of a group leader, will move the parent to the parent waiting area where they give what information they have available to the student, to the parent, and they will give updates regularly. Primary goal of reunification, communications, huge part of this process. One of the big things is parents need to know where and when to pick up their children, especially if this is not happening on your campus or it is not a place where they practice. They need this information. They need to say, okay, our school is not available. Parents, please show up here, park here, go to this entrance. If you do not go to this entrance, you will not find your children. You need to communicate that. If you have emergency notification system set up, use it. This is a good use of that to communicate your parents. If you don't know about that, you can watch the webinar that we did on emergency notification systems. Also use your local news agencies, the same agencies that will probably be interested in what's going on in your place anyways, but also whoever you use for snow closures. Any of those kind of messages, parents will be looking. So use those resources. Again, if possible, you want a primary plan for how you would do reunification, and you want to practice this. This is part of moulage drills. During our moulage drills, we will always do reunification. So if possible, have a consistent practice policy. So if you say, okay, anytime that we are doing reunification and we are able to, parents are going to go to this entrance and the kids are going to be here and the respite areas are going to be here. So if possible, practice a site, and that way parents will know, okay, this is the site that we practice. You also want to communicate out that parents must bring ID. You should not be releasing any student to someone who does not have an ID that matches what is on their emergency card. So anytime you're using your emergency notification system, local news agencies, make sure that is stressed. Parents bring ID. Who's a good fit for this team? And let's talk about the minimum amount of people who you really need. Again, sometimes in some emergencies, you will have all of your staff and faculty available to help out where needed. Sometimes you will not. Sometimes you need to work with the minimum amount of people that you can. So you need people or person in check-in. You need runner. So you need someone moving between the check-in area and the student holding area. You need people with the students. Again, you don't want to ever leave your students alone, especially after a big incident. And absolutely, you want to have some mental health professional or professionals around. Anyone trained in psychological first aid. This is going to be a high anxiety time for your students, for your staff, for your faculty, for parents, for everyone involved. You really want to try to have as many hands as possible in this area. Kind of general qualities that you want to see in this team, or just general ideas about this. Reunification is actually pretty similar to dismissal. You would especially for lower schools, maybe not so much with high school, middle school, but with elementary school, you're not going to hand off a student to any random person. You're not going to allow your students to just randomly leave before, you see where they're going. So reunification is in some ways similar to dismissal, and you will see some policies that overlap. You will see that there are some people who they're part of your dismissal team. They would be a good fit for your reunification team because it's a similar exercise. Remember that this is a high stress and kind of tragedy, compassion area. You want to have very, I'm not sure the term I'm going for. You want to make sure you have calm people who can help deal with that level of stress. The last thing is you need to make sure that order is maintained. Again, we want nothing more than to get rid of the students and give them to their parents. We want to do that in as orderly a process as possible. And sometimes we need to say the best thing for you right now is to not rush to your student, but to go through this procedure. Order must be maintained. We'll go back to the scenario that I mentioned at the beginning. If order breaks down, then you lose that accountability. You don't know where the students are, and you don't want that stress. So who's going to be on this? Your most firm and personal people. Again, you need that calm person to say, what's best right now is for you to go through this process. Don't try to find the students yourself. You know that person. Sometimes it's a coach. Sometimes it's just, that person on your team who is calm but firm and deals with the annoying parents anyways. You want someone who knows everyone. Yes, you're checking IDs. Yes, everything is written down, but it helps to have a friendly face, someone who recognizes everyone. Again, you want trained counselors or similar to help with the mental health aspects. You possibly want police to be aiding you in this thing. Maybe it's to keep your students safe from whatever caused the emergency to begin with. Maybe you need the police to keep order and make sure that everyone goes through the process correctly. Make sure that all your I's are being dotted, your T's crossed. Essential equipment, emergency pickup cards. You need the name of the students. So emergency pickup cards come in many different shapes and sizes. You'll use whatever is works for your school. Some things that you need on each of the pickup cards. Obviously, the name of the student. If possible, you should have some sort of ID number or date of birth or some other identifying thing in case you have students with same name. Happens. Name and contact information for primary parents / guardians. This is maybe not they're not the only one who is allowed to pick up the student, but if you have any questions, this is who you contact. This is obviously the primary person. And then you want a list of alternate authorized adults who can pick up the child. And again, this is an older sibling, an uncle, a family friend, just 3 or so adults who you can say, okay, well, you're not the parent, but you're clearly on this list. Here's your ID. Okay, you're on this list. You can go. You want to have an area for any explicit restrictions. And for this, I'm really talking about non-custodial parent, but there could be anything. And that's just kind of a safeguard against, yes, you have the parent / guardian and authorized adults, but just to give you a red flag to make sure that no restrictions are being bypassed. You want all this information on these emergency pickup cards. You should have all this information anyways for your dismissal policies. And again, you wouldn't release a elementary school kid to a non-custodial parent unless authorized to do so. You have these policies in place to begin with. If not, we can help you set them up. Sign out roster and slip. So again, this will come in many different shapes and sizes, but this is the information that should be contained in whatever you use. Who is the student being released? What time are they being released? Who are they being released to? So mom, dad, uncle. Who is doing the releasing? And that's just part of accountability and tracking. So whoever the staff and faculty is should write their name, and they will do their initials up end, and the signature of the adult. The signature saying, okay, I'm taking this student, these students with me. And again, you want the initials of the staff and faculty just to finish the process. And once this is done, once they're through the release area, bye. We'll see you tomorrow. Obviously, you need clipboards and pens. For all of these things, make sure you have redundancies. Make sure that you have access to all these supplies. Where do these lists, forms live? If you have to evacuate your building, how are you getting these forms and lists? So if they can live in the cloud that you can access easily, even without Wi-Fi, that's one thing. Otherwise, they should be in some kind of go bag, something that the front desk personnel or so takes with them. So you want to make sure that no matter what happened during the emergency, you have these things with you. Because what you don't want is to not have the emergency pickup cards, accidentally release a student to someone who they're not supposed to release to, and then we have to deal with that. We'll talk about communications again. This one more for internal communications, and it really just kind of helps with the overall organization of reunification. Being able to talk between the check-in area and the student holding area, being able to convey information from wherever else to the parent waiting area. That's going to help you if you have walkie-talkies, phone system, whatever you have in place, use it. Awesome. Just helps move people around, helps update information. If you have it, use it. If you don't have communications, if the network is down, whatever, it's not the biggest thing, but it does help. The last thing is signage. Again, you want everyone being funneled into the check-in area. The clearer that is labeled, the easier things are. You don't need to label the student holding area, or the respite area unless you need that kind of signage internally. But you really want people funneled to the correct area of reunification. And that might be also in your parking lot, you have one area where people enter so that everyone can also leave, that kind of thing. I'm sorry I didn't say this phrase before. I've been waiting to now. Order prevents chaos. You want to be as ordered, as consistent, as calm as possible. If you just try and think that things can happen haphazardly and think, it'll work out, don't have that attitude. Try to make everything as planned and as accordance to the process as you can. How does reunification fit into the big picture? This is really the last step of your immediate actions, of the things for that day. After whatever event happened, after your immediate action steps, whether that is duck and cover, whether that is evacuate, whether that is barricade the doors, whatever it is, those are immediate action steps. You will probably lead to an evacuation in most scenarios. You will do attendance. If you're not sure about doing attendance, watch the mini webinar from last week. Watch the full webinar that we did earlier this school year. Once all of that is done, that's about when you're going to be doing reunification. And again, once the students are through your release area, bye. That is going to be the end of what happens for that day generally. After reunification, after your students have been released, you're going to start planning for tomorrow. You're going to start planning for 3 months from now, from 3 years from now. And again, depending on what the scenario was, what the emergency was, that could look like a whole slew of different things. And we'll talk about business continuity at one point. But reunification is the last part of the day of the emergency. Who does reunification team communicate with? They're going to be in touch with the incident commander. This is not a process that the incident commander should have to oversee directly. This is a process that should be kind of outlined ahead of time. People should have an understanding of what their roles are, and it should just be an orderly process that happens. So you shouldn't need too much direct command. Your unification team will talk with attendants, and this is again for the parents whose students are not immediately available in the student holding area. The attendant team is going to help figure out where those students might be, and figure out where in the process from when the student came in the morning to now, where might that student be. So that's when attendants come in. Biggest thing is that the reunification team is talking with parents, and for many times this is going to be the first time a parent has any face-to-face interaction or any interaction at all with someone from the school following an emergency. And again, depends on the emergency. This might be very high stress. It might not be. It might be, I can't believe we have to do this every single time. It might be very high stress. The reunification team needs to be prepared to deal with parents, especially if they are in the check-in areas. That is something that we need to be prepared for. And the last one are police. Again, this is if police are needed. I'm not saying that police are needed every single time. It will depend on the scenario. It will depend on your population. It will depend on your needs. But I'm sure you can picture scenarios where you might want a police presence to help with this process. So let's talk about 3 challenges of reunification team. And the biggest one, and I've mentioned this 100 times already, keep parents away from students. You don't want students just leaving with adults. You don't want to be unsure whether a student left, whether they're unfound, whether they're not found. You want to keep track of everyone at all times. As soon as parents are able to see these students and just grab them and go, those processes are done for. You really want to keep parents away from students as much as possible. You also don't want a parent who, I don't know where my student is, let me go talk to this kid. And the kid said, I don't know what happened, but I heard that a giant whale shark spawned from the pool and attacked everyone. You don't want these kind of rumors going around to causing anxiety, which isn't to say don't be transparent, don't give information. It's just to say you don't want rumors and anxiety. One of the things to do is to practice. If parents know how reunification works, know the process, know, okay, I'm going to move from check-in area to release area, that's going to calm them down, and they're going to know, okay, I've been through this process in practice. I know what I have to do. This is what I have to do. The last thing is just be firm, calm, and consistent. You will have people who don't want to show IDs. You will have people who say, this is my child, I'm going to get them. You need to have a calm voice to say, the best thing for you to do right now is to go through this process. Make sure everything's organized. Everyone needs to go through this process. Everyone needs to show ID and sign these forms. Be consistent, be calm, bring people through the process. Another challenge is if a non-custodial parent tried to pick up a child. Don't let them. Stop them. Unless this is something where you do have permission to do it, like they are on the emergency pickup card, do not do this. Do not release a student to a non-custodial parent. don't release students to someone who's not on the emergency pickup cards. And what's going to happen when the actual custodial parent or the actual parents show up and say, "Where's my child?" and say, "You let my child go with them?" You don't want to be that person. You don't want to have to deal with that. This is, again, an area that is really going to have overlap with your regular dismissal policies. What are your policies for if an unknown adult, unannounced adult, unauthorized adult, specifically banned adult comes and tries to pick up a student? What are your policies? Who do you contact? How do you deal with the parents? You should have policies in place for that. These are emergency situations. So you can try to reach out to the custodial parent. And again, you should have the contact information for the primary person for that student, or parents if that scenario. You should have that information. Contact them. If you contact them and they say, "Oh yeah, sorry, I meant to tell you I sent a Bob to pick up my son because he's available and I'm not," follow your policies. You might need the police. You might need security. If this is going to cause stress, violence, anything, you want to deal with it before it becomes an issue. Don't be scared to contact your principal and incident command for advice. That is what they are there for. And they are the ones who can say, "Oh, I know this couple. I know the scenario, and I am okay in it." But individual members of the reunification team should not be making these kind of decisions. And the last and kind of the most hard thing to deal with is whether a student is missing, hurt, or something even more tragic has happened to that student. This is super stressful for everyone. No one wants to have to deal with this. No one. The most high amount of compassion needs to be shown. You want to keep the parents in a private area if possible. You don't, for their sake, you want to give them a bit of privacy. And you also don't want to cause more anxiety for everyone else. If you have professional help available, counselors, medical staff who are experienced with psychological first aid, police, this is a time to really tap into that resources. One of the most important things you can do is keep the parents up to date with what you're doing to find their child, and even if there's no new information. And this is mostly for the missing or hurt child. Just imagine the scenario where you go to pick up your child after emergency and they just don't know what happened to your child at all. Of course, you're going to jump to the worst case scenario, especially if you're not given any new information, especially if you feel like you're just being shuffled off to the side. Circle back, give the parents any information you do have. And again, even if you have nothing new to report it. Give them the comfort of knowing that you haven't forgotten about them, knowing that you haven't given up on them. Circle back and say, "Hey, listen, I don't have any new information to you now, but we are still searching and we're still trying to figure out exactly what happened to your student." And Chris, do you want to say a few words right here about this right now?
Absolutely. So thank you so much. And one of the biggest challenges and questions that I get when it comes to reunification is, what do I do about those situations that are not the norm? And in fact, one of you had a question about police officers showing up to pick up a child. Somebody else had questions about how we manage high schools and those students. And we'll talk a little bit more about those specific questions in a second. But the point is really important. And that is that if you're ever matched with a situation that you're challenged by and you're sitting on the reunification team, you absolutely have the ability to leverage your command center, and you should. I am actually getting ready to do a moulage drill later today, and for the first time, this particular school is going to be experimenting with the reunification process. They've done 3 moulage drills already, and for one reason or another have not felt comfortable yet to actually try that reunification process. And the majority of that discomfort comes from the fact that oftentimes there are different situations that come up. Oftentimes there are different scenarios and challenges that parents pose. And if at any point we end up in a situation where it's not the absolute norm, it's not the absolute ideal, what we want that school to do is to say, hey, you know what, at the reunification team level, we can't manage this. So here, let's get you off to the side. Let's keep going with the rest of the process. And then let's have the command center either directly or through us communicate with the parent or the guardian or whoever it is that's causing this situation, to provide some additional resources and information and answers and direction and things of the like. And so whether that, out of the norm comes from the fact that somebody that isn't on the emergency card shows up, or a student injury, illness, or worse, or frankly anything else, it's really important to know that that command center should be there to support you at the reunification team level, and very much is there to run the entire school through the rest of the emergency. And so it's one of those points that I really like to drive home. And for a lot of reasons, sometimes the reunification team will say, hey, I'm not sure I can actually reach out for help, or they won't want to reach out for help because they feel like that's not, them doing the best job that they can be. And that's not at all the case. And so if there's one thing that you take away from this, especially for those of you watching it as the reunification team, it's if you get into trouble, call for help and ask the command center to help you, because that is very much what they're there for, and they should be happy to do it for you. And of course, if they're not happy to help, then let me know and I'll send them a nice email.
Well, thank you, Chris, and that's some really great advice. At any time in the life cycle of an emergency or during normal operations, you should feel comfortable saying, I don't know, I need help. That is the environment that needs to be fostered during an emergency. You don't want to wait till it's too late to reach out to help. So thank you for that, Chris. And so kind of just in conclusion, so what is the goal of the reunification team? The reunification team is about bringing students and parents together and releasing the students from your care into the care of their parents in an orderly and safe manner. People on it need to be the most firm but personable people on it. They need to be able to deal with one of the highest stress levels parents will ever have to face. And they need to keep things in order, because again, order will prevent chaos. Your essential equipment really needs to be those emergency pickup cards with the information of the students and who is authorized, who is not authorized to pick up the students. You also want to make sure that you have a way of keeping track of which students left and with whom they left. And we talked about some challenges, and I feel like this is kind of a heavy webinar, and I'm sorry I don't have anything later to end on. This is a very high stress thing, process, but this is also a process that once set up will flow naturally. Don't let your imaginations get the best out of you. You guys will do an amazing job. Rely on the process, trust in the process, practice the process, and make sure that you are comfortable with it, and make sure you know what's going on. And not only does order prevent chaos, but chaos gets alleviated with order. And people like seeing order. People like seeing processes that help everyone. So again, I feel like that was a really heavy webinar. But again, I want to thank everyone for watching the webinar live. I want to thank everyone who is going to watch this over and over again on their own time. We'd like to give a complimentary gift for anyone either watching live or who watches it afterwards and say, hey, that sounds interesting. This link will get you a free school assessment. So we will send either myself or one of the other safety consultants, someone else from Job Emergency Services will come and do an assessment, provide some recommendations. And thank you for coming. Next week we'll be doing another mini series, and I actually don't know the topic of that one. Chris, do you know which mini series is next week?
I sure do. And actually, so a couple of things I'd like to share as we get ready to end. I'm going to answer questions in just a moment. We're almost over time, so I want to be as brief as I can here. Just to clarify, the school safety assessment that was up moments ago and was available at that link that Yedidya just had up on the screen, that is entirely free. The moulage drill is not. However, signing up won't actually confirm your price. We'll have to contact you to find out how many students you have, what your drill expectations are, and things like that. And then we'll finalize a price for you. So because we have 2 separate offers going, I just wanted to make sure you were clear on that. Just a brief note about the upcoming series. We have the continuity team will be the focus of next week's webinar. That'll be on the 11th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. If you haven't heard of a continuity team or unsure about what that is, definitely this is a webinar to be at. Then we'll go on to the counseling team, the command center, the rover team, the logistics team, the security team, and that will round us out and complete our 10-part series. After that, we'll talk about planning your CPR training, and we'll talk a little bit about Uber and Lyft and some of the other ride-sharing companies that are taking us all for a ride. I thought that was funny. Anyway, so we'll be talking about a couple of those topics here coming up as well. Before we let everybody go, I do want to just briefly share a couple of answers to some questions. The first and probably the biggest is related to high school students. And long story short, high school students have a number of challenges that go along with them. And the first is that if they are over 18, they literally can pick up, get in their car, and drive away. That's not always the best scenario, and it's not always the safest scenario for them or for anybody else out on the road. But from a legal standpoint, they do have the authority to jump in the car and drive away. So what you need to do if you have high school students on your campus is practice over and over and over again to the point that they understand what the limitations are going to be. And you need to have a deep conversation with the command center and the senior leadership team to figure out what you want to set your policies to be. So put differently, what I typically vote for at most of our schools is I'll say, I want high schoolers to be able to jump in the car and leave in the event that A, they're calm enough, collected enough, and look composed enough to get behind the wheel. B, they don't have a sibling that they expect or want to take with them. And C, their parents have checked a box at the beginning of the year that allows us to release them. And you very much can put that checkbox in. And unfortunately, because of the fact that they turn 18, that checkbox doesn't mean much, but it can dissuade them. And generally speaking, they won't fight that battle right then and there. So those 3 things: number 1, they're composed enough; number 2, they are intending to leave by themselves; and number 3, their parents have checked a box on the emergency form allowing them to leave on their own. Next, you have to evaluate the almost immediate question that follows that, which is, well, what if they do have a younger sibling that's on campus? And again, the question there boils down for me to, do they appear to be composed enough to leave, and do they appear to be able to get behind the wheel and drive safely? And then beyond that, have we gotten permission from their parents for that student to ride with them? And if both of those questions are yes, then absolutely no problem. Let them take their freshman or sophomore siblings, or if you're a K through 12, let them take their kindergarten siblings. That said, if we don't have the authority from the parents to release a child to them, if they're not 18, or if they look like they're an emotional mess right now, albeit sometimes they look like that anyway, those are going to be students that we don't want to release by themselves. So we'll continue this conversation. There were a couple more questions that came up, and we'll make sure that we get those answered for you either by email or at some point in the next couple of days by reaching out to you directly. But in the meantime, we want to say thank you so much for being on today's webinar with us. We apologize for going just a couple of minutes over time, and we can't wait to see you next Thursday as we come back together and talk about the continuity team and the work that they need to be doing for our schools. If you do have any questions, please, that haven't been answered or that you haven't shared with us yet, please feel free to email those to schools@joffeemergencyservices.com. Or, and I'm excited to announce, starting today, you are actually able to share those with us on Facebook or Twitter as well. So please feel free to direct your questions to either or any of those resources, and we will be more than happy to continue these conversations in the next couple of days. In the meantime, thank you again for being with us today. We hope you have a great weekend, and we can't wait to see you next Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific or 1 p.m. Eastern. Thanks so much.